Welcome to the Smarter Money Life podcast hosted by Andy Mattingly. Frequent guest on local TV news, regular segment on Indy Now TV, and a leader here at Forum Credit Union. Forum's mission is to help members lead their financial dreams, and in today's podcast, we're going to cover a topic that will help you improve your financial life. Mistakes happen, and if we learn from them, most instances we're better off. Unfortunately, financial mistakes don't always allow us to improve our financial health so quickly. Sometimes, ever. Hello, this is Andy Mattingly, and I'm back today to talk about some of the common financial mistakes and why you need to avoid them at all costs. So we're going to discuss some of these top mistakes to avoid. I'm going to give you a few reasons why it matters, going to give you an idea of how to avoid it, and then maybe share with you some of the things you might have to change so you can avoid these, some life changes. So we're going to just start right from the beginning. If you don't start early enough saving for retirement, that's a mistake that a lot of people make. Now, it matters because the earlier you start, the less per month you have to save later. Because, you've got all that 30 or 40 years of growth going on in your investments. So start day one of your job. Try to get to the company match. And, try to get 10% of your gross income within 3 to 5 years of you starting to save. If you can do that, that's a great way to make sure that you can retire when you want, not retire or have to wait to retire until you have enough money saved. Now, here's another one, and this happens to a lot of people. It's letting your credit score decline. Now, it matters because a credit score is going to determine how much you have to pay on your loans. It can be a factor in jobs. It can be a factor in other services. So you really want to start with the basics. Don't have any derogatory information, maybe judgments or 30-day late payments. Try to always get your loans paid. Even if you're paying a little late, get them before 30 days so they're not reportable. And then there's this thing called a FICO score or an Experian score, but most people call it a FICO. If you look on your app, you want that to be 700 or better. 850 is a perfect score. So if you want to be perfect, you're trying to get to 850. If you can do these types of things, you can avoid some of the issues you might have later in life where you're paying more in interest, which just takes more money out of your paycheck so that you can't do the fun things that you want to do. Now, another kind of basic one is not building an emergency fund. An emergency fund kind of can come in two varieties. There's the one where it's, oh my gosh, I've lost my job and I've got to cover expenses. That's the big emergency fund. But really start with this small emergency fund. It's the one that it's like, well, I have to replace all 4 tires on my car and it's going to cost me $1,000. If you've put away $3,000 or $4,000, you can cover that. And if you keep that fund around that amount, because life happens and there's so many different things that can happen to you, you want to make sure that you have that emergency fund. Now, the real key here is defining an emergency. An emergency is not that Taylor Swift is in town and I need to buy those $1,500 tickets to go. That's not an emergency. So I just want to make sure I point that out. So when you're looking at building these funds, just think about what some of the costs you might have coming up and make sure that you have the money in your emergency fund account to cover it. Once you have more responsibilities, maybe you have a home and you have kids and things like that, then you want to start building that long-term emergency fund. And that goal is try to get to 3 months, ultimately 6 months. So if something happens, you can cover that income. Now, another one, and I know people don't like to hear this, but we say this a lot. If you don't have a spending plan or you're not tracking your expenses sometimes, that's a problem. And it's really the number one reason why people end up in a financial crisis is because they don't know where their money is going. And then when something happens, they don't know what they need to do to cut it back. So you don't have to have a plan that you're putting in some app that you can use to track every expense. It's more about just once in a while knowing where your money goes. So looking at 30 days or 60 days worth of expenses and know how much money you're spending in all of these categories. And then really saying, okay, some expenses are fairly fixed. What you're going to have for transportation, what you're going to have for housing, and sometimes even utilities. But there are other things like entertainment, eating out, your choice of menu for what you're fixing, even if you're buying groceries. There's some variability there. And so if you're tracking your expenses, then you can set an amount and know how much you want to spend in those areas. I think you will find that this is a great way to find that little bit of extra money you need to put in that emergency fund we just talked about. Not paying off credit card debt quickly. And I know that sometimes you can't pay it all off quickly, but you need to think about other options. If you have a lot of different credit card debt, think about going to a consolidation loan. Reason why is you're going to have a lot lower interest rate, so that means more of your payment's going to go to pay down the principal and you'll get it paid off faster. If you have some extra money to throw to credit card debt, that's another thing. So it's really important that you pay off that credit card debt in one way or the other. Now, here's a couple of things, either as a parent or as someone younger, choosing an expensive college. If you choose an expensive college and you don't really have the money to go there, that could be a problem. So if you do that, then you need to make sure that student loans don't become an anchor on all the rest of your financial goals. So make sure that the cost of education is in line with what you expect your future earnings to be. Borrowing from your 401k. So you've been really good and you've started saving for your retirement. Don't go and then borrow from it, or worse, withdraw from it. Find a way to leverage other assets or make different plans so you don't have to borrow against your 401k or take the money out, because the consequences are you're setting back your future because you don't have any money in there, so it's not growing. And if you take a withdrawal from it, then you're going to pay taxes. So that's a big bite. So then you have to take out even more money. There's a couple of other things that people do that may seem harmless, but if you don't ever save for your vacations or you don't ever save for small expenses and you always put that on debt, you're just making it cost more because you're paying interest to buy things like refrigerators or to go on vacation. So you really need to make sure that you're saving for those things. So you have to get into this concept of delayed gratification. You may want something new, but if you can save for it over 6 months and then buy it, you're going to be a lot better off. And then you'll have more money for the next time you want to purchase something. And that gets into where you got to make sure that you're planning. Another thing is passing up professional advice when you need it. So life is full of a lot of opportunities to make financial decisions. And it's not just about investments and taxes. It's about a lot of basic things. So make sure you've developed a trusted team of advisors for all types of things that impact your financial life so that you know that you can go to them. And I'm not talking about people that you don't know or the next door neighbor who professes to be a financial expert. Make sure you're talking to someone who knows what they're talking about and has a proven track record. Now, the last two things are not related, but they are two of the things that people make the biggest mistakes on and they don't realize it. The first one is giving your kids everything. We just had a little bit of talk 2 weeks ago about paying for college, and this kind of falls into that. If you want your kids to have a better financial life than you did, one of the best things you can do for them is to teach them financial responsibility and how important it is to make the proper choices. So you have to make sure that they're understanding that. So your goal is that you want to make sure that you're showing your kids how you do things and how you save for things, and not give them everything that they want if you haven't saved for it or there hasn't been a plan for it. And then the next one that's a big mistake that people don't always understand is avoiding the markets. And what that means is at some point in your life, you're going to have to make sure that you take some risk beyond just a basic savings account if you want your returns to last over time. If you stay out of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and other investments, you're going to have a lower overall return. It is the least amount of risk, and if that's where you are, that's a good idea. But if you find a trusted professional, this is a great way to make sure that you can leverage what risk you're willing to take and increase your returns so that your investments go farther, and then in the long run, you don't have to put as much in. So, these several things that you need to avoid, a lot of them are simple everyday life opportunities. So we're always going to have this opportunity to make a right decision or a decision that's going to cost us. Some of these are minor, and they might only be a year or two setback. But some of these have long-term consequences. So the more of them you can avoid, the better chance you have to live the financial life that you want to live. This has been another episode of the Smarter Money Life podcast powered by Forum Credit Union. Please leave your thoughts in the comments and be sure to look for our next episode wherever you get your podcast. Remember, now is a great time to make a difference in your financial life. Until next time.